Ambassador William Carter adjusted his navy blue uniform as he waited outside the Grand Council chambers. After 20 years representing Earth to the Galactic Council, he had grown used to the cold, tall corridors of the Galactic Hub Station. What he had never grown used to was the constant dismissal of human ideas and concerns. Today would be different. Carter looked at his small team, Frank Miller, his chief science advisor, Lisa Garcia, the military attaché, and Jordan Phillips, his diplomatic aide. They all knew what was coming. "Are you sure about this, sir?" Jordan asked quietly. His young face showed concern. Carter nodded, his gray hair catching the artificial light. "The President and Joint Chiefs are in agreement. We've prepared for this moment for 5 years." The massive doors slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the council chamber stretched in a perfect circle, with raised platforms for each of the 12 founding species. Humans, despite contributing to the Confederacy for over 50 years, still had a floor-level position with the other junior members. The Ardathian representative, Javier, looked down from his elevated platform, his blue-tinged skin wrinkled around his 4 eyes as he announced, "The Council recognizes the human delegation." Carter walked to the center of the room, the traditional speaking position. He didn't activate his translator pad, instead letting his words come through in raw English, a subtle but deliberate breach of protocol. "For 53 years, humanity has been a member of this confederacy," Carter began. "In that time, we've shared our unique approach to science, contributed our military during the Nexari conflict, established trade routes, and helped terraform worlds that other species could not adapt to themselves." Around the chamber, translator E. Devices hummed as they caught up with his speech. Some of the council members shifted uncomfortably. Yesterday, this council voted to restrict human access to the Epsilon sector, a sector that human scouts discovered, a sector rich in resources that would benefit all Confederacy members. Carter paused, letting his words sink in. This is merely the latest in a long pattern of decisions that treat humans as useful workers, but not true partners. Our medical techniques saved millions during the Voltar plague. Our ships form the backbone of your defense network. Our agricultural methods feed 12 worlds outside our own systems. The High Chancellor, a tall, thin, Melosian, raised her hand. "Ambassador Carter, the Epsilon matter was decided by proper vote. If you wish to appeal—" "We do not wish to appeal," Carter said firmly. "We wish to leave." A shocked silence filled the chamber. The concept of a species leaving the Confederacy was almost unheard of. In the Council's 300-year history, only one minor species had ever withdrawn. Carter continued, his voice steady. "As of 0600 Galactic Standard Time today, Earth and all human colonies have officially withdrawn from the Galactic Confederacy. Our ships are already returning to human space. Our technologies previously shared under Confederacy treaties are being secured." Javier stood up, his voice sharp with alarm. "This is absurd. You cannot simply walk away from the Confederacy." "We can and we have," Carter replied. "The withdrawal documents have been filed with the Confederacy Central Record. We followed every legal procedure." The chamber erupted in voices, some angry, some worried, some simply confused. The High Chancellor banged her ceremonial staff against the floor, bringing order back to the room. "Ambassador Carter, surely we can discuss this. Perhaps certain accommodations can be made regarding the Epsilon sector." Carter shook his head. "For too long we've been asking for equal treatment, not special treatment. Every human request for full council membership has been delayed. Every human scientific breakthrough has been claimed as a Confederacy achievement while our people get minimal credit." He turned slowly, making eye contact with each council member. "We've learned our lesson. The Confederacy needs humanity more than humanity needs the Confederacy." With that, Carter signaled to his team. As one, they turned and began walking toward the exit. The council erupted again, with several representatives leaving their platforms to intercept the humans. Valerian Councilor Dex blocked their path, his massive rocky frame impossible to move. "Do you understand the consequences of this action? Your colonies will lose Confederacy protection. Your trade routes will be considered non-priority." Lisa Garcia stepped forward. Our colonies will have human protection, counselor. And as for trade, she smiled tightly. I believe you'll find many of those routes were established and are maintained by human companies. They walked around the Valerian and continued toward the door. As they reached it, Javier called out, "This emotional display is exactly why humans are not ready for full council membership. You'll be back once you realize you cannot survive alone." Carter stopped at the doorway but didn't turn around. "That's where you're wrong, counselor. We know exactly how well we can manage alone. What remains to be seen is how well you all manage without us." The human delegation stepped through the doorway and out of the Confederacy. 2 days later, on the Earthship Constellation, Carter looked out at the stars as they headed back to the Sol system. His personal communicator beeped with an incoming call from Earth. "Mr. President," Carter greeted as the image of President Richard Wells appeared. "Bill, I've just received the Council's first communication. They're offering immediate discussions about the Epsilon sector." Carter smiled sadly. "Too little, too late." The President nodded. "Phase 2 is already underway. Human ships are withdrawing from Confederate space on schedule. Our defense grid is at full alert, but there's been no military response." "There won't be," Carter said confidently. "They're too shocked to mobilize quickly, and once they start running numbers, they'll realize how dependent they've become on human resources. And our people in Confederate territory? Coming home as planned. Some will stay, those with strong personal ties or who genuinely prefer life there. We're not forcing anyone." The President looked worried. "How long before they feel the real effects?" Carter considered the question. "Critical systems will start failing within 6 months. Their economy will show stress even sooner. By this time next year, they'll be begging us to return. And will we?" The old diplomat looked out at the stars again. "Not as junior partners, sir. Never again as second-class citizens. If we return, at all, it will be on equal terms." After the call ended, Carter thought about his 50 years of diplomatic service. He had always believed in the Confederacy's mission of unity and peace among the stars. It pained him to see that dream end, but perhaps a new dream could take its place, a true partnership of species, built on mutual respect rather than the old hierarchies. As the constellation jumped to faster-than-light travel, Carter felt something he hadn't experienced in years: hope for a better future. Sometimes walking away was the only way forward. 6 months after humanity's dramatic exit from the Galactic Confederacy, the effects were becoming impossible to ignore. On the Valerian trading hub of Kresic Station, Merchant Drool stomped his rocky feet in frustration as he stared at the empty docking bay. 3 shipments missed this month alone, he growled to his assistant. The human transport company claims they've reassigned their vessels to human space. All across Confederate territory, similar scenes played out. The vast network of human shipping corporations that had once formed the backbone of interstellar commerce had quietly redirected their fleets. Goods still moved, but slower, less efficiently, and at much higher costs. On Earth, Admiral Susan Blackwell stood in the Orbital Command Center, watching holographic displays track the movement of hundreds of ships. The impressive human fleet, once scattered across the galaxy as peacekeepers and patrol vessels, now formed a tight defensive perimeter around human-controlled systems. "Status report on the withdrawal," she requested. Commander Eric Johnson nodded. 97% complete, Admiral. Only our deep space research vessels and a few diplomatic ships remain outside our territory." "And our defense grid?" "The outer beacon system is operational. If anyone approaches our borders with hostile intent, we'll have advance warning." Blackwell nodded with satisfaction. For decades, the Confederacy had restricted human military development, claiming it was to maintain peace. In reality, it had kept humanity dependent on Confederate protection. What the Council never knew was how many innovations humans had developed but never shared. "Any unusual activity from Confederate forces?" she asked. "They've increased patrols along our border, but nothing threatening. Most of their fleet is busy dealing with the pirate situation in the Orion Arm." Blackwell frowned. "The pirates that our ships used to handle for them, miles away on the Mars Research Complex." Scientist, Alan Wright worked through the night, surrounded by complex equipment. After 3 years of secret development, his team had finally achieved a breakthrough in quantum communications technology. "Run the final test sequence," he instructed his team. The lab hummed with energy as the new system activated. Unlike the traditional relay network controlled by the Confederacy, this new network used quantum entanglement principles to allow instant communication across any distance, without physical relays. "Signal is stable," reported Katie Anderson, his chief engineer. "Transmission successful to all test points." Wright allowed himself a smile. "Begin the transition. All human systems switch to the new network over the next 72 hours, as human systems disconnected from the Confederate relay network. The carefully balanced load distribution failed. Across Confederate space, communication systems experienced cascade failures, creating delays and dead zones. On distant worlds, human specialists and engineers quietly packed up and returned home. On the agricultural world of New Eden, farm equipment sat idle without the human technicians who understood its workings. In the vast shipyards of Proxima Centauri, half-completed vessels remained untouched as human designers departed with their blueprints. On the Confederate capital world, an emergency council session had been called. The mood was tense as representatives faced the first real crisis in generations. "The human withdrawal was an emotional tantrum," insisted Councillor Javier. "They'll return when they realize the benefits of Confederate membership." High Chancellor Mila looked unconvinced. "It has been 6 months and they show no signs of returning. Meanwhile, our economy faces significant disruption." A small, furry Hathak representative spoke up. "My world relied on human agricultural techniques. Without them, we face food shortages within months. The Talarian medical conglomerate reports they can no longer produce several life-saving medications without human biochemists," added another voice. Javier slammed his fist down. "Then we must show them they cannot simply walk away. I propose sanctions against human territory." The High Chancellor sighed. "With what leverage, Counselor? They provided more services than they received. Traditional sanctions will harm us more than them." Back on Earth, President Richard Wells met with his cabinet to discuss the ongoing situation. The atmosphere was cautiously optimistic. "Our economy has stabilized faster than expected," reported Secretary Nina Martinez. "Without Confederate restrictions, our industries are expanding rapidly. The new colonies in the Tau Ceti system are already producing minerals at full capacity." "And the military situation?" asked the President. Defense Secretary Paul Wilson nodded confidently. "Admiral Blackwell, reports our defensive perimeter is fully operational. We've detected several Confederate probe ships testing our borders, but nothing serious." "What about our people who remained in Confederate space?" asked Wells. "Most are doing well," replied Carter, who had taken a position as special advisor after his retirement as ambassador. "Though they face some harassment, particularly on worlds like Ardathia, where anti-human sentiment was already strong." The President looked troubled. "We need to ensure their safety." "We've established quiet extraction routes," Carter assured him. "Anyone who wants to leave can be brought home safely." Wells turned to a window overlooking Washington, D.C., his expression thoughtful. "When we withdrew, I expected immediate diplomatic outreach from the Council. Instead, they seemed to be in denial." "They never understood our true value," Carter said. "They saw us as useful but replaceable. They're only now realizing how deeply integrated human innovation had become in their society." The President nodded. "And our next step?" "We wait," Carter replied simply. "Let them feel the full effect of our absence. When they finally come to the negotiating table, they'll understand we must be treated as equals." In deep space, far from either human or Confederate territory, the merchant vessel Odyssey drifted silently. Its captain, Ben Foster, had refused to return to Earth after the withdrawal, convinced he could maintain his trading routes independently. Now his ship floated dead in space, its systems critically damaged after an encounter with pirates who had previously avoided this sector for fear of human patrols. As life support failed, Foster dragged himself to the communication console and sent out a distress signal on all frequencies. Under Confederate protocols, the nearest patrol should respond within hours. Days passed with no response. The once well-patrolled trade routes had become dangerous no-man's lands without the human ships that had kept them safe. As Foster's oxygen dwindled, a ship finally appeared on his scanners. To his surprise, it was an Earth vessel. "This is Captain Olivia Green of the Earthship Sentinel," came the transmission. "We've received your distress call, Odyssey, preparing for rescue operations." Later, as medical staff treated his injuries aboard the Sentinel, Foster asked the question that had been bothering him. "How did you find me? I thought human ships had withdrawn from this sector." Captain Green smiled. "They have, but we've maintained a quiet search and rescue network. No human gets left behind, even those who chose to stay. The Confederacy never came," Green finished for him. "Their nearest patrol was 3 systems away, handling another crisis." Foster closed his eyes, finally understanding what Earth's withdrawal truly meant. The Confederacy wasn't just losing human innovation and labor. It was losing the very principles of duty, efficiency, and compassion that humanity had brought to the stars. And the collapse was just beginning. 2 years after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council held an emergency session. The Grand Chamber, once a place of order and dignity, now buzzed with tension as representatives argued openly before the meeting even began. High Chancellor Mila struck her staff against the floor 3 times, bringing a temporary quiet to the room. "This emergency session will come to order," she announced, her voice weary. "We face unprecedented challenges across Confederate space." The display in the center of the room activated, showing a map of the Confederacy. Large sections glowed, red, indicating systems in crisis. 12 major systems are experiencing critical resource shortages, reported the Valerian representative. "My own homeworld has fuel reserves for only 30 more days." "The medical situation is worse," added the Tellarian counselor. "Without human biochemists, production of life-saving medications has fallen by 60%. Death rates are rising on 14 worlds." From her seat among the independent representatives, Counselor Eleanor Chen watched silently. As one of the few humans who had chosen to remain in Confederate space, she represented several independent human colonies that had maintained their Confederate membership. "Perhaps Counselor Chen could convince her people to return," suggested Javier, his tone less arrogant than it had been 2 years ago. All eyes turned to Chen. She stood slowly, looking around the chamber. "I have maintained regular contact with Earth," she said calmly. "They are aware of the Confederacy's difficulties." "And?" pressed Javier. "And they are not interested in returning under the old terms," Chen replied. "Humanity is thriving independently. Their economy has grown 20% since withdrawal. Their defensive capabilities have advanced significantly." The chamber erupted in voices again. Chen waited for quiet before continuing. "You never understood that humanity wasn't demanding special treatment. We were contributing far more than we received. The current crisis simply proves this point." Far from the council chambers, Admiral Susan Blackwell received troubling reports in her command center on Luna. "Confederate military movements near the Proxima system," reported Commander Johnson. 3 battle groups converging. Blackwell studied the tactical display. "Likely target?" "The Human Research Outpost. It's technically outside our defensive perimeter." Blackwell's face hardened. "Trying to seize our technology, no doubt. Prepare to execute Operation Lighthouse." "Yes, Admiral," Johnson replied, entering commands into his console. Across human space, hidden defense platforms activated. These installations had been secretly built over years, unknown to the Confederacy. Now they formed an interlocking network, far beyond the officially acknowledged human borders. When the Confederate fleet approached the research outpost, they encountered technology far beyond what they believed humans possessed. Advanced defensive shields flared to life around the station. Automated weapon platforms emerged from hidden positions. The Confederate commander ordered an attack anyway. Within minutes, his flagship was disabled, and 2 support vessels critically damaged. The remaining ships quickly retreated. News of the failed military action spread quickly through Confederate space. For many species, it was the first indication that humanity had been hiding their true capabilities all along. In Earth's diplomatic center in Geneva, Daniel Hayes, Director of Intelligence, reviewed the latest reports with President Wells. The attack was expected, Hayes said. Our warnings about technological raids proved correct. The president nodded grimly. And how did our defenses perform? Perfectly. Confederate ships never even reached the outer perimeter of the station. 0 casualties on our side. Wells looked out the window at the snowy Swiss landscape. I never wanted this confrontation. We left peacefully. Some in the Confederacy still think they can solve their problems by taking what we have rather than earning our partnership, Hayes replied. This demonstration should discourage further attempts. And their internal situation? Hayes brought up a series of reports on his tablet. Getting worse by the day. 3 major member species have followed our example and withdrawn. Without human patrols, piracy has increased 400% along major trade routes. Have they reached out diplomatically yet? Not officially, Hayes said. But we've received unofficial approaches through intermediaries. They're starting to realize the severity of their situation. On the Council capital world, riots had broken out in 3 major cities. Food shortages had hit civilian populations hard. The grand buildings of the Confederate government stood in stark contrast to the suffering in the streets. Inside the Council's private chambers, a secret meeting took place. Only the highest-ranking representatives attended. We must face reality, the High Chancellor said firmly. Without human innovation, technological development has stagnated. Without human ships, our trade network is collapsing. Without human peacekeepers, conflicts are flaring up across Confederate space. What do you suggest? Asked the Tellarian counselor. We need to open formal negotiations for humanity's return. Javier, who had been the most vocal anti-human voice on the council, now looked defeated. They will demand full council membership, equal status with founding species. Yes, agreed the chancellor, and we will grant it. We have no choice. Back on Earth, Olivia Green had been promoted to admiral after her extensive rescue operations in former Confederate space. She now commanded Earth's diplomatic fleet, a position that put her in regular contact with alien vessels. Another request for emergency assistance, reported her communications officer. A Hathak colony world facing starvation. Green sighed. These calls came daily now. Verify their situation and send the supply ship Guardian. Standard protocol. Food and medical supplies only, no technology. Yes, Admiral. Later that day, Green met with an unexpected visitor. A Confederate diplomatic vessel had arrived carrying Counselor Chen. Welcome back to Earth, Green greeted her. This is unexpected. Chen smiled tiredly. I come unofficially. The Council is preparing a formal outreach, but I wanted to speak with Earth's leadership first. About what? Terms, Chen said simply. The Confederacy is prepared to offer significant concessions for humanity's return. Green escorted Chen to a meeting with President Wells and his advisors. As they discussed the Confederate proposal, it became clear how desperate the situation had become. Full membership status, Chen explained. Access to all technology levels. Control of 3 disputed sectors, including Epsilon. Carter, still serving as special advisor, looked skeptical. The same council that called us emotional and immature 2 years ago now offers everything we asked for? They've learned a harsh lesson, Chen replied, though some still don't understand why you left. President Wells leaned forward. It was never about the benefits we received. It was about respect and recognition of our contributions. Chen nodded. I know. I've lived among both societies. But now you have a choice to make. Will humanity return to help rebuild what's collapsing? Or will you let the Confederacy fall completely? As the meeting continued into the night, opinions were divided. Many humans wanted nothing to do with the species that had looked down on them for so long. Others saw an opportunity to reshape galactic civilization into something more equitable. President. Wells listened to all views before speaking. "We didn't leave to watch the galaxy fall," he said finally. "We left to prove our worth and to stand on equal footing. If the Confederacy is truly ready to acknowledge that, perhaps there's a way forward. The decision they would make would shape the future of not just humanity, but all spacefaring species. And for the first time, that decision would be made from a position of recognized strength rather than assigned weakness." 5 years had passed since humanity walked away from the Galactic Confederacy. Earth and its colonies had flourished in independence, developing technologies at a pace that would have been impossible under Confederate restrictions. President Laura Martinez, who had succeeded Richard Wells in office, stood at the window of the Oval Office. Earth's skyline had changed dramatically, with new buildings that incorporated advanced materials developed without Confederate oversight. "The latest reports from our border patrols," said Admiral Olivia Green, placing a tablet on the president's desk. Martinez turned from the window. "Trouble?" "Not from the Confederacy," Green replied. "They've pulled back most of their military presence from our borders, but piracy continues to increase in what was once Confederate space. 3 more trading hubs have shut down completely." The president picked up the tablet, scanning the information. "And the refugee situation?" "Growing worse. 4 more colony worlds have requested evacuation assistance. Their Confederate support systems have collapsed entirely." Martinez sighed. When humanity had withdrawn, they hadn't anticipated the speed of the Confederate collapse or the humanitarian crisis that would follow. Now ships full of desperate refugees from various species arrived at human borders daily. "Continue the relief operations," Martinez ordered. "No one gets turned away who needs food or medical care." "And the technology requests?" Green asked carefully. "Same. Policy. Basic aid, yes. Advanced tech, no. Not until we have official agreements." The communication screen on the president's desk lit up with an incoming call. The face of Daniel Hayes, now serving as Foreign Secretary, appeared. "Madam President, the Confederate diplomatic vessel has arrived. Their representatives are ready to meet." "I'll be right there," Martinez replied. In Geneva, the old Earth Diplomatic Center had been expanded with new wings to accommodate the growing importance of humanity's independent government. Martinez arrived to find the Confederate delegation already seated in the grand meeting room. To her surprise, High Chancellor Mila herself had come, along with representatives from 5 major Confederate species. Their faces showed the strain of recent years. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting," Mila began, her formal dignity intact despite the circumstances. "The people of Earth are always open to peaceful dialogue," Martinez replied diplomatically. The High Chancellor nodded. 5 years ago, humanity left our Confederacy. At the time, many believed it was an emotional decision that would quickly be reversed. She paused, looking around at the human delegation. "We were wrong. Not just about your return, but about your importance to our shared civilization." The Valerian representative spoke next. "The Confederacy is not what it was. 3 major member species have followed your example and withdrawn. Our trade routes, once the safest in the galaxy, are now plagued by pirates and raiders. Without human innovation driving progress," added the Talarian, "technological development has stagnated across Confederate space. Systems we took for granted are failing faster than we can repair them." Hayes leaned forward. "We've been monitoring the situation. We're aware of the challenges you face." "Then you know why we've come," Mila said. "We wish to propose a new relationship between humanity and the Confederacy." She activated a holographic display in the center of the table. A formal document appeared, rotating slowly. "Full membership status for humanity," she explained. "Equal standing with founding species. Access to all technology levels. Control of 3 disputed sectors including Epsilon. Everything you asked for before your departure." Martinez studied the document carefully. 5 years ago, this offer would have been eagerly accepted. "And now?" Mila asked, tension evident in her voice. "Now we must consider that humanity has flourished independently," Hayes answered. "We've discovered that we never needed the Council. It was the Council that needed us." For several hours, the two delegations discussed possibilities. The Confederate representatives grew increasingly desperate as they realized humanity might not return at all. Without your help, millions more will suffer, the Tellarian pleaded. Already 3 colony worlds have been abandoned completely. Martinez listened to all arguments before responding. We never intended to cause suffering. Our withdrawal was about recognition and respect, not punishment. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the peaceful Swiss landscape. But rejoining the same system that dismissed us for decades isn't the answer either. What alternative? Is there? Asked Mila. Martinez turned back to the group. A new beginning. Not humanity rejoining the Confederacy, but something different. A partnership of equals built from the ground up. Back at the White House, Martinez met with her full cabinet to discuss the Confederate proposal. Opinions were divided. They're only offering what we asked for originally because they're desperate, said Defense Secretary Greg Howard. Once they recover, the old attitudes will return. I disagree, countered Eleanor Chen, who had been appointed as special advisor for interspecies relations after her return from Confederate space. The crisis has forced genuine change in their thinking. Many younger representatives truly understand what was wrong with the old system. The real question, said Hayes, is what benefits humanity by returning to any form of partnership? We've proven we can thrive alone. Martinez considered all viewpoints before speaking. We didn't leave to isolate ourselves permanently. We left to prove our worth and to stand on equal footing. She activated a display showing the extent of the humanitarian crisis in former Confederate space. And we didn't leave to watch others suffer when we have the ability to help. What are you proposing? Asked Howard. A new alliance, Martinez replied. Not rejoining the Confederacy, but establishing something better. The Terran Cooperative, an alliance of species based on equal contribution and equal benefit. For weeks, drafts of the new agreement flew back and forth between Earth and the Confederate capital. The old power structures resisted change, but the reality of their situation gave them little choice. Meanwhile, human aid ships continued their missions throughout former Confederate space. On the colony world of New Horizon, human engineers helped restore power systems that had been failing for years. On medical stations throughout the sector, human biochemists trained local scientists in techniques they had once kept to themselves. Admiral Green oversaw a joint operation between human ships and the remaining Confederate fleet to clear pirates from a vital trade route. Working together for the first time as equals, they accomplished in weeks what the Confederacy had failed to do in years. On Earth, public opinion was shifting. Images of successful cooperation efforts appeared in media reports. Stories spread of friendships forming between humans and various alien species as they worked together without the old hierarchies. When Martinez addressed the Global Assembly, she spoke of a new vision for humanity's role in the galaxy. We've proven our independence. Now we have the chance to prove our leadership, not through dominance but through partnership. As the final negotiations neared completion, Hayes met privately with High Chancellor Mila. You understand this isn't a return to the old ways, he said firmly. The Terran Cooperative will replace the Confederacy, not join it. Mila nodded slowly. 5 years ago, such a suggestion would have been unthinkable. Now, many see it as our only hope for survival. Not just survival, Hayes corrected her. A better future for all our peoples. For the first time in their long acquaintance, Hayes saw genuine respect in the Chancellor's eyes. The galaxy was changing, and humanity, once dismissed as the emotional newcomers, was leading the way. 10 years had passed since the day humanity walked out of the Galactic Council. The galaxy looked very different now. Where once stood the rigid hierarchy of the Confederacy, a new alliance had taken root, the Terran Cooperative. On the newly constructed Unity Station orbiting Earth's moon, representatives from 27 species gathered for the 10th anniversary celebration. The station's grand hall was designed with equal spaces for all member species, a physical reminder of the cooperative's founding principle. William Carter, now an elderly man with snow-white hair, watched the proceedings from a quiet corner. At 87, he had lived to see his greatest diplomatic achievement bear fruit. "Quite a change from the old council chambers," said a familiar voice. Carter turned to see High Chancellor Mila, one of the few original Confederate leaders who had embraced the new order. "Indeed," Carter agreed. "No elevated platforms, no junior member sections." "Your vision," Mila acknowledged. "Though I admit I doubted it could work." Carter smiled. As did many. Equal contribution, equal benefit seemed too simple to succeed. Yet succeed it had. In the decades since its founding, the Terran Cooperative had rebuilt trade networks, stabilized failing colonies, and advanced technology at a pace the old Confederacy never achieved. In the center of the hall, President Julia Diaz, Earth's current leader, prepared to address the gathered representatives. At a nearby table, Admiral Olivia Green sat with military leaders from various species, discussing the joint fleet that now protected cooperative space. "Representatives of the cooperative," Diaz began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. 10 years ago, we faced a divided galaxy. The collapse of the old order threatened billions of lives across countless worlds. The room grew quiet as she continued. From that crisis, we built something better, not through domination or hierarchy, but through true partnership. Across the station, in the massive docking bay, engineers Sam Kelly and Jury, a Talarian, worked together on a new generation of ships. These vessels incorporated the best technologies from all cooperative species. "Hand me the phase coupler," Kelly requested. Jury passed the tool without looking up from her work. "This engine will be 30% more efficient than anything in the old Confederate fleet," she noted with pride. "And safer too," Kelly added. "The Valerian cooling system prevents the overheating problems we had with the early models. Unlike the old days when humans had kept their best innovations secret, now knowledge flowed freely between trusted partners. Each species contributed their unique strengths, and all benefited. On distant colony worlds, similar scenes of cooperation played out daily. On New Horizon, human agricultural techniques combined with Hathak soil enrichment methods had turned a failing colony into a thriving community. In the medical research centers of Talaria Prime, scientists from 8 species worked together on cures that would benefit all cooperative citizens. Even former council worlds that had initially resisted the new order had begun applying for membership in the cooperative. They accepted the strict meritocratic rules that ensured no species could dominate another. Back in the main hall, Carter listened as President Diaz concluded her speech. "Today, we sign new diplomatic relations between the cooperative and the remnants of the Confederacy," she announced. The document displayed on the large screen explicitly acknowledged the vital and irreplaceable contributions of each member species and established protection for cultural and technological sovereignty. As Earth ships once again traveled freely through former council space, they were no longer met with contempt, but with something new: respect. Humanity had proven itself not by force of arms, but by the gap they left behind. After the ceremony, Carter wandered to a large viewport overlooking Earth. A group of young diplomats from various species noticed him and approached respectfully. "Ambassador Carter," said a young human named Kyle Parker. "We're studying your withdrawal speech at the Diplomatic Academy. Would you share your thoughts on that day?" Carter looked at the eager faces around him: human, Talarian, Valerian, Hathak, and others. Species that once barely acknowledged each other now worked and trained together. "I was angry that day," Carter admitted. Decades of being dismissed had taken its toll. But beneath that anger was something more important: the conviction that relationships must be based on mutual respect. "Did you know what would happen?" asked a young Valerian. "That the Confederacy would collapse without humans?" Carter shook his head. "We suspected disruption, but the speed and extent of the collapse surprised even us. What we never anticipated was this outcome, that from that collapse, something better would emerge." On the observation deck below, a new monument was being unveiled. A simple plaque reading, "Sometimes you must walk away to find your true value." Below it, carved in smaller letters, and sometimes others must lose you to find it. President Diaz stood before the assembled representatives. "We didn't leave to watch the galaxy fall," she said, echoing words President Martinez had spoken 5 years earlier. "We left to give it a chance to rise again, as equals." Later that evening, as the AO celebration continued, Carter found himself standing with Daniel Hayes, who had recently retired as Foreign Secretary. "Did we do the right thing?" Carter asked quietly. "All those years ago?" Hayes looked out at the gathering. Dozens of species mingling, working, and celebrating together as genuine partners. "Look around you," Hayes replied simply. "The old council claimed to unite the galaxy, but it divided us into rulers and ruled. What we have now is real unity." Carter nodded slowly. He thought back to that day in the council chamber, when humanity had walked out. The anger and frustration he had felt, then had long since faded, replaced by something he hadn't expected: pride, not just in humanity, but in what all species had built together once freed from the old hierarchies. As Earth rotated slowly below the station, Carter remembered President Wells' words from long ago. "We didn't leave to isolate ourselves permanently. We left to prove our worth and to stand on equal footing." They had done that and more. By walking away, humanity had created the opportunity for a true partnership of equals. The collapse of the old order had been necessary for the birth of the new. "To the future," Hayes said, raising his glass. "To all our futures," Carter replied. "Together." From the viewport, the stars stretched out across the galaxy. Worlds that had once looked down on humanity now sought its friendship and partnership. And humanity, having proven its value, had discovered something important. True strength came not from dominance, but from bringing out the best in others. The lesson had been costly, but the galaxy would never forget it.